In December 2024, 35-year-old Jessica Weaver was indicted on a criminal charge in Texas for the drowning of her young son at an El Paso water park more than a year and a half earlier. The tragedy occurred in May of 2023 in a 4-foot-deep pool of water at Camp Cohen Water Park, where the little boy, Anthony, reportedly passed away as a direct result of his mother's negligence. According to an arrest report, which contains 7 eyewitness accounts, a woman matching Weaver's description sat and played with her phone for over an hour without so much as looking up to check on the toddler. At least 2 people described seeing the woman singing along with music on her phone. Meanwhile, Anthony was seen alone in the pool without a life vest, even though the park provides them for free. Weaver was reportedly shocked to learn that the boy was unresponsive after noticing that an emergency of some sort was going on. One of the witnesses was so appalled by her apparent lack of concern for her child that they reported her to the police. But by the time anyone realized that Anthony had drowned, it was too late to save his life. In addition to her failure to put a life vest on the child, Weaver is accused of violating the park's rule, requiring anyone under the age of 6 to be accompanied by an adult. She also failed to keep Anthony within her sight, go into the water with him, provide or request CPR, or provide proper care in general. Weaver faces 1 count of injury to a child or elderly, causing serious bodily injury or mental deficiency. Number 24. Josh Klinghoffer. In a horrifying collision that was captured on video, 44-year-old Pearl Jam guitarist Josh Klinghoffer mowed down a grandfather who was walking to an Alhambra, California grocery store in March of 2024. 47-year-old Israel Sanchez was in a crosswalk when he was fatally struck by Klinghoffer's GMC Yukon SUV as it made a left-hand turn. Klinghoffer and other motorists exited their cars and rushed over to help Sanchez, who died 2 hours later from blunt force injuries to the head. A few months after the accident, the victim's family filed a wrongful death and negligence lawsuit against Klinghoffer, whose attorney argued that Sanchez's death was an unfortunate tragedy. Klinghoffer's lawyer said that his client did all the right things after the crash, including stopping, administering aid, and calling 911, and staying at the scene until police arrived. But Sanchez's family claims that Klinghoffer was on his phone when the crash occurred, and that they have video evidence to prove it. Furthermore, the plaintiffs are accusing Klinghoffer of having a history of not paying attention to the road, as evidenced by a half-hour-long interview he participated in with a radio station while driving. The victim's only surviving daughter is seeking monetary damages, while her lawyer, Nick Rowley, said that he believes Klinghoffer should be charged and prosecuted for vehicular homicide. The musician has pleaded not guilty to a misdemeanor charge of vehicular manslaughter without gross negligence. Klinghoffer has also fired back at the plaintiffs with allegations that they're baselessly using unrelated examples in their attempts to prove that he's a habitually inattentive driver. In January 2025, a judge ruled that the family cannot seek punitive damages because texting and driving does not qualify as despicable conduct, which is required under California law in order to pursue this type of compensation. The decision significantly limits the amount of damages the Sanchez family can go after, and Klinghoffer continues to fight the case in an effort to make it go away completely. Number 23. Julian Duke Brown. 66-year-old nurse Sandy Schultz Peters was relaxing by the ocean in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, in June of 2024 when she was run over by a police pickup truck driven by Horry County officer Julian Duke Brown. Onlookers rushed over after hearing her scream and found her trapped under the vehicle. One witness, Amanda Billadieu, said that Sandy's scream was like anything you'd hear in a movie, describing it as pure fear or pain or both. Some people worked together to lift the truck in an attempt to free Schultz Peters, who died from her injuries after being rushed to the hospital. Officer Brown was placed on leave and retired later that summer. In the meantime, Schultz Peters' family has filed a lawsuit against the Horry County Police Department, accusing Brown of being distracted when he struck the victim. The complaint alleges that Brown had ample time to visibly scan the beach for people and other obstructions, especially since he wasn't responding to an emergency, but he failed to do so, causing the victim to suffer conscious pain, suffering, and fear to an extent and degree that no human being should ever bear during her final moments alive. Additionally, the plaintiffs argue that Brown had previously run over someone's belongings while driving on the beach, indicating a possible habit of being distracted behind the wheel. The Horry County Police Department is fighting to dismiss the lawsuit and denies the allegations detailed in the lawsuit. According to the most recent available updates, the parties were waiting for a judge to decide whether to grant the dismissal or to order a trial, which is what Schultz Peters' family is hoping for. Number 22. Gregory John Hudson. 57-year-old mining worker Gregory John Hudson was found naked, bound, gagged and murdered at a friend's townhouse on Australia's Gold Coast on October 23, 2014. After arriving at the residence a few days earlier, he had gone on a days-long cocaine binge while visiting several of the area's brothels. An autopsy found that he had died from a combination of lethal cocaine levels and a pre-existing heart condition, but based on the state Hudson's body was found, it was clear that he had met with foul play. Shortly before his death, Hudson had arranged for a 38-year-old escort named Milan Shante Walker to meet with him at the townhouse. He planned to pay her in cocaine and had already met with her during his drug binge, so he had no logical reason not to trust her. Unbeknownst to Hudson, however, Walker had plotted with two men, Lee Benjamin Feld and Benjamin Sammy Gobrail, to rob him during the meeting. Feld and Gobrail instructed Walker to distract Hudson while they burglarized the residence. Neither of the male suspects planned to cross paths with Hudson during the robbery, but it happened, and a stressful enough situation ensued to result in Hudson's death. Evidence also showed that Gobrail had used Hudson's bank card to withdraw $2,000 from an ATM. In 2017, Walker pleaded guilty to manslaughter, burglary, and robbery. She was sentenced to 5 years and 9 months in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving just a little over a year. The court also made it clear that she would likely be deported to New Zealand following her release, despite having spent most of her life in Australia. Gobrail and Feld pled guilty to robbery and other charges and were sentenced to 3.5 years and 2 years, 7 months, respectively. Number 21. Gamze Yilmaz. Just weeks after receiving a new Mercedes-Benz as a 21st birthday gift from her father in 2014, newly licensed Gamze Yilmaz collided head-on with a Land Rover in North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany. The Land Rover's occupants, a 58-year-old man and a 62-year-old woman, survived with critical injuries, but Yilmaz was not so lucky. Just minutes after posting selfies while sitting inside the vehicle, she died in the crash. The young woman had been on her way home from her job as a kindergarten teacher. When the wreck occurred, she was reportedly distracted by a WhatsApp message that she was trying to read while driving and failed to negotiate a curve in the road, causing her to veer into oncoming traffic. Yilmaz was traveling at nearly 50 miles per hour when her sedan struck the SUV. Investigators ruled the incident a tragic accident, and Yilmaz's family flew her body back to their native country of Turkey for a proper burial. Number 20. Ernest Durwood Rawls. In February 2022, a small plane carrying 8 people crashed without warning into the ocean off North Carolina's Outer Banks. Included among the lives lost were the pilot, 67-year-old Ernest Durwood Rawls, his son, 28-year-old Jeffrey Worthington Rawls, the plane's owner, 45-year-old Douglas Hunter Parks, and Parks' girlfriend, 42-year-old Ann McInnes Fulcher. High school students Jonathan Cole McInnes, Noah Lee Styron, Michael Daly Shepard, and Jacob Nolan Taylor also died in the crash. The single-engine Pilatus PC-12 was flying its passengers home to Beaufort after a hunting trip in Hyde County. Roughly 25 minutes into the flight, Rawls told air traffic control that he was roughly 200 feet below the required minimum altitude of 1,900 feet. The aircraft climbed rapidly to 4,700 feet, prompting air traffic control to try contacting Rawls, but he didn't respond. As the plane continued to climb, it suddenly went off the radar, then crashed into the water roughly 3 miles offshore. Rawls had not communicated any distress signals, nor did he seem distressed prior to the unusual tragedy. In early 2024, federal investigators released their findings, which concluded that Rawls was likely distracted while programming the plane's flight management system. Evidence from the plane's systems showed that he had struggled to program the system despite multiple attempts to do so throughout the flight. Consequently, Rawls probably failed to properly monitor the aircraft's speed, causing it to slow down and stall out. Authorities believe Rawls became disoriented and that the crash resulted from his attempts to regain control of the plane. 5 of the victims' families sued and were awarded a $15 million settlement. Number 19. Eaten by a manhole. A busy mum was carrying her child and talking on her phone while walking in the Indian city of Faridabad in October 2021 when she fell into a manhole. The woman wasn't watching where she was going and therefore didn't notice the open sewer until it was too late. Witnesses immediately rushed over to help the mother and her child out of the hole. They both survived thanks to a man who jumped in without hesitation and assisted with their escape. Footage of the incident went viral, with many perceiving the video as a cautionary tale about the importance of paying attention to their surroundings. Number 18. Drew Fleming. 22-year-old Megan Scholtes of Hudson, Wisconsin, was sitting in her car at a stop sign in Washington County, Minnesota, one evening in early 2016 when a nearby fellow motorist, 20-year-old Drew T. Fleming, lost control of his Saab. Fleming's car went airborne and landed on top of Scholtes' Ford Fusion, killing the young woman at the scene. According to police, Fleming cooperated with the investigation and indicated that he may have been distracted when he lost control of the vehicle. His mother, Angela, told the press shortly after the accident that her son was not ready to discuss it and that he was devastated. The tragedy became all the more heart-wrenching when authorities revealed that Scholtes was pregnant at the time of the crash. Fleming pleaded guilty to reckless driving and was sentenced to 6 months in jail, followed by 2 years of probation. He was also required to spend 20 hours sharing his story as a way to warn others about dangers of distracted driving. Authorities declined to charge him with distracted driving, even though he had admitted to possibly being on his phone when the crash occurred, because they were unable to find specific enough data to prove a case. 4 years later, in 2020, Fleming received a speeding ticket in Dunn County, Wisconsin, for going more than 100 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. Luckily for him, no one seems to have gotten hurt this time. Number 17. Joshua Ruiz-Martinez. On April 21, 2024, police responded to the St. Cloud, Florida home of 32-year-old Joshua Ruiz-Martinez, who claimed that he had found his young daughter face down in the bathtub after turning away momentarily to prepare a bottle. It was too late to save the child, and evidence revealed that Ruiz-Martinez had been playing video games when the drowning occurred. When confronted with the evidence, he admitted to being responsible for his daughter's death. In February 2025, nearly a year after the girl's death, Ruiz-Martinez was arrested on an aggravated manslaughter charge. According to a police report, he initially told the cops that he had been intermittently playing video games throughout the day while tending to the child. He is now accused of downplaying his amount of gaming in an apparent attempt to cast himself in a less unflattering light to law enforcement. Ruiz-Martinez pleaded not guilty and is currently out of custody as he awaits trial, which is scheduled for April of 2025. It remains unclear why it took authorities a year to charge him in the case. Number 16. Mitzi Nelson. Mitzi Nelson of DeWitt, Michigan, first made news headlines in 2014 when she fatally struck a woman on a bicycle due to being distracted behind the wheel. The 23-year-old was texting and driving when she hit 35-year-old mother of two, Jill Bialik, who was following all proper safety precautions. In June of 2015, Nelson pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor charge for her role in Bialik's death. After consulting with the victim's husband, Jordan Bialik, the judge sentenced the young woman to 3 to 6 months in jail, followed by 2 years of probation. He also banned Nelson from owning a cell phone for 2 years, ordered her to speak at 20 distracted driving classes, and sentenced her to 150 hours of community service. In a heartfelt display of forgiveness that captured widespread attention, Jordan hugged Nelson at the end of the sentencing hearing. Just 2 years later, however, she landed in more trouble with the law for driving dangerously. This time, Nelson was caught driving under the influence and with an open container of alcohol in her car on New Year's Day. Police pulled her over shortly before 2 a.m. after she failed to signal a lane change. An officer noticed an overwhelming odor of alcohol on Nelson's breath, and her eyes were bloodshot and glassy, indicating that she had likely consumed more than the 1 gin and tonic that she had admitted to drinking prior to driving. She performed poorly during a field sobriety test and blew nearly twice the legal limit on a breathalyzer. Nelson was still on probation for the distracted driving crash at the time of the traffic stop. In March 2017, she pleaded guilty to driving while visibly impaired and an open container charge. She was sentenced to 45 days in jail and ordered to pay more than $900 in fines. Number 15. Kieran Cooney. Shortly after 11 p.m. on August 22, 2023, 31-year-old Kieran Cooney struck 36-year-old flight attendant Cinzia Ceravolo with his car while driving in Liverpool, England. Ceravolo had just finished working a Ryanair flight from Dublin and was crossing the street while on her way home when Cooney hit her. She died from her injuries 4 days later. Upon arriving at the scene, emergency responders noticed that Cooney was distressed and pacing. He would later test positive for cocaine, and the amount in his system was over the limit, even though it wouldn't have affected his driving. A search of Cooney's phone revealed that he had sent his partner a one-word text, "really," just the moment before the crash. He was actually on his way to his partner's house when the incident occurred, leaving one to wonder why the trivial conversation they were having via text. Couldn't wait until Cooney's arrival. A witness told police that Ceravolo was crossing the road at a slow pace and in a diagonal manner, suggesting that she too may have been distracted by her phone. She may have been looking for a taxi after trying to call one a little while earlier and missing it. Cooney was going under the 40-mile-per-hour speed limits when he hit Ceravolo. In December 2023, he was convicted of death by dangerous driving and sentenced to 3 years in prison. He was also banned from driving for 6.5 years in order to undergo a driver's safety course. Number 14. Christopher Scholtes. A parent's worst nightmare came true for an Arizona couple in July of 2024 when Parker Scholtes was found dead in her father's vehicle in the driveway of the family's Marana home. The discovery was made by the little girl's mother, Erica, as she arrived home from work. Inside, she found her husband, 37-year-old Christopher Scholtes, playing PlayStation, which he had been doing for 3 hours. During that time, temperatures outside the car had reached a sweltering 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which means that it was likely much hotter inside the vehicle. Christopher claimed that he had only left Parker in his car for a half hour because she had fallen asleep and he didn't want to wake her up. Text messages exchanged between Christopher and Erica over the following days revealed that the absent-minded father had a habit of leaving their children in the car. In one message, Erica wrote that she had told Christopher to stop doing it, adding, "How many times have I told you?" In the aftermath of Parker's tragic death, Christopher initially claimed that he had left the air conditioning on in the vehicle, only to later admit that he knew it would shut off automatically after a half hour. He was charged with murder and child endangerment and is currently free on bail amid the ongoing case. According to an update from November 2024, a possible plea deal is in the works, and a tentative trial date is set for September 2025. Number 13. Joshua Burwell. In what could only be described as a tragic case of fatal distraction, 33-year-old Joshua M. Burwell of Sheridan, Indiana, walked off a cliff and fell 60 feet to his death while distracted by an electronic device in December 2015. The incident occurred on Christmas Day at San Diego's Sunset Cliffs during a trip to California, where shocked onlookers watched helplessly as Burwell tumbled to the hard ground below. Burwell was snapping photos when he fell, according to his mother. 3 witnesses leapt into action and descended the cliff in an attempt to rescue Burwell, but there was nothing they could do to save him from his injuries. He was pronounced dead at the scene, prompting the authorities to remind the public of the importance of being aware of one's surroundings. Number 12. Kamonnan Thiamphanit. 27-year-old Kamonnan Angela Thiamphanit wasn't her usual self during a murder mystery board game night with friends in April 2024. She seemed distracted throughout the evening and suddenly left during the early morning hours. Angela told her friends that there was an emergency and that she was going to summon an Uber to go deal with the matter. 2 days later, she was found brutally stabbed to death at her London mansion. The young woman's phone location history revealed that she left the murder mystery gathering shortly before 4 o'clock in the morning. Her iPad had played violent rap music at the residence for 5 hours before and after her disappearance, which was highly unusual because it wasn't the type of music Angela would ever listen to. Angela's long-distance boyfriend had become especially worried when he began receiving text messages from her in English, which they never communicated in. Investigators are being cryptic about the identity of the alleged killer, who had fled the country by the time he was identified as a suspect. According to the most recent available updates, authorities are in the process of trying to have the man extradited to the UK. Number 11. Abby Sturgess. While driving near the Australian town of Rutherglen, Victoria, in January 2023, 23-year-old Abby Sturgess became distracted by social media and stopped paying attention to the road. She slammed into the back of a 59-year-old cyclist named Anthony Reekman, who bounced off the car's windshield and hood before being flung nearly 85 feet from the vehicle. He died from his injuries, despite Sturgess' attempt to perform CPR while waiting for emergency responders. Investigators determined that Sturgess was going between 49 and 54 miles per hour at the time of the crash. She initially claimed that she hadn't seen Reekman because the sun was in her eyes, but a search of her phone revealed that she had sent several messages on Snapchat in the minutes leading up to the wreck. Sturgess had also opened the Instagram app in the seconds prior to the collision. In 2024, she pleaded guilty to dangerous driving causing death and was sentenced to a year and 4 months in prison. During her sentencing hearing, Sturgess regretfully referred to the day of the accident as the worst day of her life and the last day of Riekman's. The judge acknowledged that the young woman's remorse seemed genuine and that Sturgess was a promising candidate for rehabilitation, which had been taken into consideration in deciding her sentence. Number 10. Nikki Deaney. 29-year-old British care worker Nikki Deaney had one job, and it was to watch over a 28-year-old epileptic and learning disabled man named Majid Akhtar, whose cognitive abilities were the equivalent of an average 4-year-old. But she got distracted by her phone during a visit to Kingsmill Reservoir in Nottinghamshire. In September 2012, Akhtar fell into the water and drowned while having a seizure. By the time Akhtar's body was found by a pair of dog walkers, it was far too late to save his life. When questioned about her lack of oversight, Deaney claimed that she had looked away from Akhtar for all of 3 seconds, but an analysis of her phone records revealed that she was texting consistently for 30 minutes leading up to the drowning. According to news reports, Deaney was texting back and forth with a man she had connected with on a dating site, while ignoring Akhtar's needs. An inquest ruled that Deaney's failure to properly care for her client resulted in his death. In February 2017, Deaney admitted to a charge of contravening health and safety regulations and was sentenced to 4 months in jail. Following the sentencing, a health official described Akhtar's death as entirely preventable had the defendant only kept her focus where it belonged. Number 9. Drake Brezina. 30-year-old Christina Pearson was driving in Iowa City, Iowa, on August 9th, 2023, when a truck blew a red light and barreled into her car. She was rushed to the emergency room where she died from her injuries later that day, and her partner suffered critical injuries. The truck's driver, 25-year-old schoolteacher Drake Brezina, was texting at the time of the crash. He was seen holding up a phone in surveillance footage while driving 44 miles per hour in a 35 mile per hour zone. Brezina was charged with homicide by vehicle and serious injury by vehicle. In August 2024, he pleaded guilty to the charges and received a 15-year suspended prison sentence. He was also sentenced to 5 years of parole and community service, which includes the requirement to talk to others about the consequences of distracted driving. Brezina will avoid serving any time behind bars as long as he avoids further legal trouble while serving his non-custodial sentence. During the hearing, Brezina tearfully apologized to Pearson's family and said he'll live to honor Pearson every day. The tragically slain woman's loved ones did not accept Brezina's apology. When questioned about her inability to forgive, Pearson's mother simply said to imagine losing a child to a similar tragedy. Number 8. Hellish hike. A hiker in Palos Verdes, California, made the mistake of looking at her phone near a cliff during a solo trek in December 2019 and was lucky to survive what happened next. She plunged off the cliff and fell 200 feet down to the shoreline, where she became stranded with excruciating injuries. It was already 7 at night, and darkness soon fell without anyone hearing her screams for help. The woman finally caught someone's attention 13 hours later at 8 o'clock in the morning, and emergency responders were promptly called to the scene. They rescued the stranded hiker using a helicopter and took her to the hospital, where she was treated for serious but non-life-threatening injuries. All things considered, she was incredibly lucky to survive both the fall and the undoubtedly uncomfortable overnight stay on the rocky shore. Number 7. Larry Powell. On September 28, 2020, 68-year-old Larry Powell was executed in cold blood by his own stepson, 19-year-old Wesley Hightower, who shot him in the back of the head at his Ammon, Idaho home. Hightower carried out the murder with help from an 18-year-old homeless man named Daniel Wood, whom he had met just days earlier. According to reports, Hightower told Wood that he could live at the home if he helped with the planned homicide by distracting Powell. After falling under police suspicion, Hightower initially claimed that an intruder had killed Powell, then tried to blame the killing on Wood. 2 days prior to the shooting, Hightower and Wood had tried unsuccessfully to poison Powell to death. They also had plans to kill Hightower's mother, but were arrested before they could act on these intentions. In early 2022, Wood pleaded guilty to a reduced second-degree murder charge and was sentenced to 20 to 60 years in prison. The plea agreement was made based on several mitigating factors, including his cooperation with the authorities, as well as his diminished mental capacity and his unstable childhood. In determining Wood's sentence, the judge also considered his violent criminal history and a pattern of disrespect toward authority. Hightower pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received a 27 to 67-year prison term. He apologized to his mother Carol during his sentencing hearing as she held her head in her hands with an anguished expression on her face. Kaur was reportedly left so traumatized by her husband's murder at the hands of her own son that she began carrying a gun in order to feel safe, and the judge made sure to point out the agony that Hightower had caused while imposing his sentence. Number 6. Facundo Rodriguez. A commuter in Buenos Aires, Argentina, nearly lost his life before learning how one split second of lapsed judgment can be fatal. 24-year-old Facundo Rodriguez started crossing a street in the town of Liniers on a Monday morning when he suddenly felt something brush against him. It was a train, and he hadn't noticed the mammoth vehicle because he was looking down at his cell phone. Rodriguez tried to step backwards, but instead fell and hit his head. He could be seen repeatedly touching his head while bystanders and transit workers rushed over to check on him. Paramedics also checked on Rodriguez, who declined further medical attention after no signs of major injury were detected. Many social media commenters remarked about how lucky Rodriguez was to be alive, while others criticized him for being so oblivious to his surroundings. Number 5. Serious trip and fall. A 67-year-old New Jersey woman suffered serious injuries in June of 2017 after tripping over an open hatch door while walking along a sidewalk in Plainfield. She was looking at her cell phone and texting when she walked right into the open door, then tumbled forward over it and fell 6 feet. Surveillance footage showed a curious crowd gathering around to see what had happened. Emergency responders from the local fire department came to the woman's aid and took her to the hospital, where she received treatment for her injuries. Number 4. An impromptu swim. In early 2017, footage of a woman tripping and falling into a water fountain at a Beijing shopping mall went viral. Like many of the other people on today's list, she was staring at her phone when she plunged face forward into the water. The large fountain is impossible to miss when you're actually looking in its general direction, and it would have probably been easy to avoid if the woman had simply glanced up every second to keep track of where she was going. After falling in, she quickly rose to her feet, gathered her belongings, and exited the fountain. She appeared to be embarrassed by the incident as she covered her face and made a mad dash for the mall's exit. Number 3. Boy falls down storage hole. In early 2022, footage of a Turkish boy falling down a storage hole at a shopping mall circulated worldwide. In the video, he could be seen looking at his phone as he suddenly plunges through the floor. A worker who was loading merchandise into the storage space reacted with visible shock as he looked down the hole. The young man could have endured an extremely painful fall, especially if he had landed on the hard floor. But in a mind-blowing stroke of luck, he landed on top of a stack of boxes and was able to safely lower himself to the floor as the stack bent forward. After a very close call with a potentially much worse outcome, he walked away without a scratch, free to carry on with his day. Today's topic was requested by Sean Delap 8587 and Nikki 123BXD. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Scent booster burglars. In October 2024, news outlets in Birmingham, England, warned residents of an unusual new burglary scam that had recently been reported throughout the city. A man and a woman had gone to a victim's front door pretending to be laundry scent booster salespeople. They asked if they could come inside for a drink, then stole credit cards and a cell phone once they gained access to the home. After learning about the bizarre scam, police put an alert out to the public to stay alert and for information about the couple's identities. It's unclear whether any arrests were made. Number 1. Brandon Bostian. During a routine commute from Washington, D.C. to New York City on May 12, 2015, an Amtrak train took a 50-mile-per-hour curve at over 100 miles per hour outside Philadelphia. The entire train derailed with 3 cars falling onto their sides. Some of the more than 200 passengers were able to walk away while others had to be cut out of their crushed cars. 8 people died and some were left with lifelong injuries. The train's engineer, 32-year-old Brandon Bostian, had been working the route for several weeks when the derailment occurred. Speculation largely centered around the theory that he had gotten distracted and forgot where he was along the route, which would explain why he accelerated along the curve rather than slowed down like he was supposed to. Bostian was not using his phone, under the influence of drugs, or having a conversation when the wreck occurred, leaving investigators to conclude that his mind may have still drifted elsewhere. The crash was deemed an accident due to error, and Bostian was ultimately acquitted of 8 counts of manslaughter and 238 counts of reckless endangerment. Thanks for watching. Would you rather get in an Uber driven by a drunk driver or board a plane flown by a drunk pilot? And why? Let us know in the comments section below.